Did you just kill the spider?
Welcome to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wilson today, joined by Tim, the Freedom Variant O'Connor.
I'm here, Kevin. We've got an action-packed show. We may have too much
Yes.
stuff to actually cover. We
We got a ton, but so we'll see what we get to. But we'll see. We'll see. We got a lot to talk about. We got to talk about some zoning issues, some housing issues, Trump, New York self-defense cases, a whole bunch of stuff.
the New York self-defense cases are freaking wild, dude. In a bad and negative. It's awful what's going on there. It's just awful.
Yeah, no, it's definitely one of those things where like I'm reminded why gun control ends up hurting like some of the most vulnerable people too. Like it's just
Yeah, it absolutely always has. It's a tool
yeah.
for oppression. It's a tool for disasters in densely populated areas. It's a tool for the government to fail and fail again. It's like gun control kicking out your feet and then giving you a crutch of well, what's the crutch, right? Like
Yeah.
we don't really know because
Yeah.
people are
Well, in theory, safety, right? Like, oh,
right.
we're keeping us safer. And that's what it is. But yeah, we'll talk about people like LaShawn Craig, and what happened with him and several others. There's a great thread on it that we'll share. But yeah, so we'll talk about that stuff. Some Rochester issues, maybe some local issues. You said a Norwich thing we're going to talk
Yeah, I
about
got
too, right?
I got a Norwich thing that I want to talk about that plays into our libertarian themes, and it's a sad situation. It's a challenging situation. My heart goes out to the people in Norwich. My heart goes out to I don't want to make too much of it because it's a human thing, and there's lots of good solutions. And right at the moment, I think they're perhaps leaning towards a bad solution. You know,
Yeah. All right. Yeah, we'll get into that. And I'm gonna watch out and see if the spider making a web over my camera is gonna try to take me out.
nice.
I won't take her out. It's fine. She's just doing her thing, doing spider things. It's fine.
Yeah, spiders doing spider things are generally okay. Did you know that you eat like 4 pounds of spiders a year? Just
Four
inhale them
pounds.
when you're sleeping. Yeah, I mean,
I
holy
feel like
shit.
that's way too many spiders. That is not a true. That sounds like fake news, Tim.
It's probably fake news. It's
Four
probably like 17 spiders that there's but 4 pounds sounds so much better.
4 pounds. I'm pretty sure that's that's like thousands of spiders. They don't weigh much.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's amazing how many you eat. It's wild.
All right. Anyway, we've definitely given our audience something to think about before we head into the main show. So just ruminate on that a bit. Think about the allegedly 4 pounds of spiders that you have eaten this year.
Every year.
All right, we're going in 3, 2, 1.
Now, an hour of clarity for exhausted people of our nation mired in toxic partisanship. Left versus right, us versus them. While we pay to keep our politicians fighting, how do we, the people, rise up and solve the great challenges of our time? We do it by embracing freedom and liberty. There may be no such thing as a free lunch, but this hour is as close as it gets. Welcome to A Free Solution.
Welcome to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wilson today, joined by Tim, the Freedom Variant O'Connor.
I'm here, Kevin, and we were talking. We have an action-packed show. We've got a lot of things we want to cover. We're kind of working on a show where we're going to do our top 10 libertarian solutions to all of the current problems in the world. But one of the things I've run across, and one of the things we've talked about a lot, is the problems with local tyranny, small town zoning, things that people do to protect their local environments that end up benefiting huge mega corporations and empower the government to punish your neighbor and steal from you. And so, right in little old Norwich, New York, they have proposed a chronic nuisance property style law
Yeah.
And I'm very concerned that it's, as always with these kind of laws, I'm very concerned that it's going to have the opposite effect of what people hope, which is to clean up the streets and get rid of some homeless and deal with what they're perceiving to be property owners that are allowing crappy behavior to go on.
Right. Uh, we have one of those in Rochester.
How's it working?
It has some good effects and bad effects, right? Like, so the way some of the nuisance laws work here in Rochester's is sometimes it might be like, okay, imagine you have a bar and someone has a fight outside of that bar. That
Yep.
adds a couple nuisance points against that property. And if other acts of violence or the property is not kept up well, you can get more nuisance points, and eventually you will lose your license to operate a business out of that space, or your certificate of occupancy. You'll lose that, and you won't be able to rent to it because it applies to both residential and commercial spaces in Rochester. So some of the things are like, good, right? Like they're like, if you have a lot of violence in one space, and the property owner and is not able to do anything about it, then sometimes the property owner gets punished, even though sometimes it's not really their fault. That's sort of a
Yeah.
frustrating thing for them. Sometimes it's like, hey, it's just like crime is happening in and around the neighborhood, and the property owner wants to be part of the solution and can't do anything about it. But sometimes it is some, like some bars, it's a thing, and then some like rental properties too. Sometimes like you get nuisance points because like the lawn is unmowed and it's attracting rats and there's garbage, in the house, and like, like a whole bunch of stuff. Other times it's like you get nuisance points if there's like, a domestic violence situation, and sometimes that provides incentives for landlords to kick people out who, you know, uh, maybe that's like the one of the partners' only like way of having a place to live. And now you've kicked both of them out. Um, so yeah, there's some problematic things with it too.
So what I see is the problematic thing, Kevin, and I've talked about this in the past. I feel like the middle class side hustle is under siege, right? Where you can work hard and accumulate some property and perhaps generate some revenue from rent. Um, and then the world wants to dump those problems on the property owner's shoulder, like they're making so much money that somehow they're obligated to, you know, provide things when people are destroying their property. You
Yeah,
contract your way into saying, hey, you've got to clean up your own garbage and stuff like that. And then the people don't hold up their end of the bargain, and you're still stuck cleaning up garbage. You're going broke. And so then the government comes crashing in on you,
yeah,
and they don't offer a solution as to where you can say, well, they're bad people, help me get rid of them. They're bad people, they owe me a lot of money. You've got no real recourse there.
yeah.
And I feel
It's
like we
like that's the tough
target
part with
these
it.
guys.
Yeah, with the nuisance system in Rochester, like, because I remember some of the neighborhood service centers that they try to counsel like landlords on some of this stuff, but sometimes it's like, look, I have a bad tenant. I would love to kick them out. New York state law does not allow me to kick them out. Like there's so many tenant protections in place. Like this person is destroying my property, bringing their violent friends around, and annoying the neighbors, and I can't make them leave because you made laws that made it impossible for me to make them leave.
Right.
And then suddenly, and then what ends up happening is eventually, if the city decides to come down to landlord, then okay, now they've lost their ability to operate, and they can't make money off the property anymore. And then, in theory, like that person isn't supposed to be, rented to anymore. But so they lose their housing anyway,
Yeah.
and the landlord just loses their ability to operate a business. I mean, they would say that like, okay, we'll make exceptions for stuff and try to work with them, but then you end up with a system that ends up being kind of arbitrary.
It's becomes very political, and that's
Yeah.
one of the concerns, right? Like you're unpopular with town board members or something like that, and you have a bad tenant, and all of a sudden you're getting $100 a day fines. Our friend Shelly out there on YouTube land, guys, has a comment that sums up one of my big, huge concerns. We've seen this happen in Otsego County where they seize property for back taxes and sell it, keep the money. So, anyways, Shelley's saying they have laws like this in Albany. The city will end up taking the property and sells it cheap. but it requires more money than it's worth to upgrade the property. We run into this authoritarian spiral that is destroying wealth, and it's doing it all over the place. I would say that my concern is the city takes it, sells it to a BlackRock, a residential property investor, or worse yet, there's the government is going into the business of providing housing. When we take existing housing away, the government is incentivized to build housing. And once they build housing, they're not going to evict anybody, right? Like you guys are going to create a problem that snowballs. Like it's not going to, and look, this is my opinion, and I think you guys are struggling with real issues, so I'm sympathetic. But I think you're empowering the wrong side here. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. That might be a case. Again, I like as someone who like lives in a close area, I sort of understand why a nuisance point system is created, right? Like I sort of get like the point, right? If you have a business, for instance, that gets nuisance points because they're being loud at 2 a.m,
yeah,
I sort of get it, right? Like you're making everyone mad if you're operating a business in a semi-residential area, like and you're being obnoxious. Okay, I get why you can't do that, but you could probably also solve that with some individual fines too. It's just it's a messy system, and again, living in a dense city is somewhat messy. But to your point though, like the way this ends up operating, because it's political, you end up creating further disincentive for small landlords, small property managers to be able to step into this, and the only people who can take the hit between this between like nuisance systems that are a bit too aggressive and zoning regulations if you're trying to build or improve any properties, and in some places like rent control, proposed rent control, tenant protections, things like that, it ends up being difficult for small to medium property managers to participate in this market. Now I want to talk about the local issue, but we'll put a pin in the national bill to limit the number of residential properties that big corporations can own. Did you hear this bill in Congress about that one?
Oh my God, no.
No, okay, we'll talk about that in a little bit. I want to talk about the Rochester thing though, because again, they're trying to bring back rent control in Rochester.
Oh, what a great idea! What could possibly go wrong?
Yeah, they tried to do it before. Basically, like what New York State does is they say, okay, we're going to do a survey of the landlords, and we're going to try to determine how much vacancy there is. And if there is less than, I think, 5% vacancy, so if there's not a lot of housing supply, then they can implement rent control. So the logic goes, if we don't have a lot of houses, we're going to do this thing to implement price controls, which may limit the supply of houses and subsidize demand. Tim, what happens when you limit supply and subsidize demand? What happens?
Always, when you subsidize demand,
limit supply,
prices have to go up, right? They have to go up, or you get no new supply. When the government distorts markets under the guise of virtue, all it does is create disasters. That's what it really does, right? So subsidize demand, limit supply, you're going to end up with homeless people, right? Like that's it.
That's what it is. Either there will literally be no homes, or the new homes that do get built, because what rent control often does is it doesn't like exactly limit new homes, but it makes it so that people want to peg their initial price higher because you can only increase by small amounts.
Right.
With rent control, and this is essentially how the New York State program works. And so they want to do it again in New York, because or in Rochester specifically, because they tried the survey, they didn't hit the number that they wanted, and now they're trying it again because they didn't get enough responses out of the landlords. So now they're going to fine landlords who don't respond like $1,000. So if they don't respond to this, and they think that if the landlords respond, that they will find that they have less than 5% vacancy, so they can implement rent control in Rochester. And they justify this by saying that the rents have risen in Rochester, that they've gone up 35% since 2020. And the thing about that is is why have rents gone up in Rochester since 2020? Well, a couple things. One, a lot of people left downstate and they moved up to Rochester because it's relatively cheap up here, right? So we actually did sort of get an influx of people over the last couple of years because people wanted to work remote. Rochester's a decent place to work remote because it's cheap and there's still kind of stuff nearby, right?
Good. Yeah, that's like a net positive. It's a good thing happened.
Which is a good thing. But Rochester has been one of the worst markets in the country for new building, for building new apartments and new housing. Like literally, like I tweeted about, I meant to bring this up for the show, but I tweeted about this a couple months ago. Like literally one of the worst markets for housing. Like we have gotten nothing over the last few years. So no wonder like prices have gone up. We just can't build stuff. It's so difficult to build stuff. And every darn project like gets dragged down in like zoning board meetings, and people want like affordable housing amendments to in accommodations for any project that goes up. And you can't just build by right single family homes or doubles or triples or anything like that on lot size. You got to get a variance for it. So it drives up the cost. And again, that pushes out most small developers. You can only do it if you're one of the large developers, and it ends up driving up the price. Because again, that cost has to be recouped somewhere. Where does it get recouped? It gets recouped in rent prices. And then they can charge more for that because there's not a lot of competition. There probably is low vacancy in the city of Rochester. And the reason why is because we can't build stuff. We can't build enough housing to accommodate all the people who have moved here recently. When you have constrained supply, you end up with higher prices.
Yeah, I mean, you're hitting a nail on the head. And again, I think that people lose sight of the fact that these are potential entry level businesses for small contractors could save enough money to build one house and rent it out, right? That would be
or buy a property and fix it up and you know rent it out, right?
But the risk is immense, right? You have to rent out property, you're going into business with the government, and it's not even with them. They're like your enemy and they want to steal from you, and they terrorize you. It's all of those things that are making this housing crisis incredibly bad.
It absolutely is that. No, it is that. And again, I've known several people who've done it, including the former co-host of the show, Andrew Hollister. He's done a little bit of this too, and it's been a mess, but very, very challenging. But what I think is that there's a certain group of people, politicians specifically and activists, who care more about showing how much they dislike landlords and developers than they do about finding actual solutions to help low-income families get into housing, right? Like fundamentally, that's what it is. And they can't see any other solution besides demonize the people who are making profits off of this. And like, maybe the government can build housing eventually, right? Like, which, I mean, there's their own issues with that. We have like a housing authority that does stuff, but they've got their own challenges.
Right.
And they cannot possibly meet all of the demand, right? Like to the extent that the Rochester Housing Authority has a legitimate job to do, like it shouldn't be to build all of the housing in Rochester. Like there's plenty of space within the free market to do that stuff. It should be to like help build like for the people on the very edges if you're going to have this thing exist.
Arguably, they shouldn't be in that business anyway. That's business that's better left in the private sector. And what they should be doing is identifying the disincentives that they are imposing on people that are preventing demand from meeting supply. Okay, so that's the reality, and that's what they're doing. And again, they're distorting the markets by interfering with supply. You made a great point in there. This hate on landlords, this hate on small-time people, we're missing the point that we're not expanding opportunity for everyone when we virtue signal on hate, when we want to hate landlords who are saying they're ripping off their tenants. And people aren't doing it. Good people will not take the risk of renting out a room, of going into a property renovation, because the government is terroristic in nature. You can literally lose everything. You can have someone destroy all of your hard work do so much damage in a couple of months to your property that you'll never have recourse for, and you'll have such a hard time evicting them. The government is missing the boat. They could solve the homeless crisis with freedom and protecting and respecting individual property rights. They could do it, Kevin. They literally could do it. It's ridiculous that they don't.
Right. And again, like that's a good point too. Like you have a tenant like who's going to destroy their place. Yeah, you should be able to evict them. That frees up more resources from the landlord to be able to improve the property, rent it out to someone else who needs it. But again, if they when they finally evict a tenant, a lot of them are like, well, I'm going to have to raise rent because like once I finally get them out, because I need to recoup some of my costs for all these repairs I've had to do. Right. So that causes rents to go up in your city. And there's all these little factors. There's the tenant protections, which again, I know are well-meaning, but it costs money to do that. That raises rents. Limiting the supply, that raises rents. If you implement price control, that's going to raise rents. Making it difficult to build, that raises rents. All these little things like make it more expensive. And the solution to that is to just let people build stuff and make it easier for there to be higher churn in like the rental market, and you will lower prices. And that will do so much more good. But like that doesn't tell as good of a story.
Right.
It does tell like when we tell so like, okay, listen, but like in aggregate, everyone's going to be better. I promise. And like, we don't have, everything will just be normal and people will have houses and like, they'll be comfortable and they'll be fine. Like that doesn't sound like as concrete as like, oh, are you going to like let this family be out on the street? That's the story people tell. So how do libertarians get better at telling this story about like telling a compelling economic case for something that like, is seen versus like not seen in this particular situation?
So what I wonder, Kevin, is is it so obvious to us that we don't have an easy way of explaining it? We're like, you've distorted the market. You're punishing middle-class people. You're preventing people from getting homes. You're preventing society from taking care of each other and itself. And you're actually hurting people by not allowing them to be evicted, not getting the instant feedback of being evicted, not protecting the little old lady who would be willing to rent out rooms for $100 a month as long as she could get a psychopath out of her freaking house, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. And I've heard stories about that too, about friends who like they couldn't get someone out of their house. They've been, and it's sort of like it's tough to like rent out individual rooms and share spaces and stuff now, but like
zoning too, like they zone.
Yeah, it is. And so that's one of those things like that opens up more opportunities for people and makes their lives better. And I think like the homelessness thing too is worth bringing up. If you lower rents, there's some people who are on the margins who a market going down by $200 a month in rent means that they get a home now, right? Like that's the difference between, like someone being on the street and someone like living in comfort. And our zoning policies, like the virtue signaling against landlords and developers, means that more people are homeless. Like that is what it does.
That's a good point. Maybe that's a good way to tell the story. Like, look, your virtue signaling is actually making people homeless. I would love to say that to someone who's whining about landlords, small time, middle class landlords.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll keep workshopping that but we got to go to break. Thanks again for joining us here on A Free Solution on WYSL. We're going to be back in just a few minutes. Talk to you soon.
Wow, that was beautiful. Well, yeah, it is true though. Like you made so many good points there, right? Like libertarians are not great at communicating things that they want to be. They understand to be obvious. You and I have this conversation. We're exactly on the same wavelength. We're talking about markets getting distorted by the government. We're talking about people being homeless because of phony virtue, and we're talking about punishing small business opportunities that is exacerbating the homeless problem. And yet it's not sexy enough for people,
Yeah, right. It's like if I said that to like anyone on the center left right now, they'd be like, "Oh, what we think of the landlords?" They'd mock me for it, right? Like like, "What do you mean you're defending landlords and property owners?" I'm like, yeah, but like, listen, most of those folks are just men and women who are just trying to like do a job, right? Like, I know people think that like landlords just like leech off the system, but a lot of times like, okay, you're responsible for property maintenance and doing all this stuff and making a property nice, and then you rent out and you make money, and there's nothing inherently wrong with that. I know there are bad landlords out there. There are landlords that are jerks. There are landlords who don't take care of property. There are landlords who don't who take advantage of people. I get all that. we can work around that. There should be like protections in place for that stuff. I get it. But, like they are providing a service, and if you have more competition in that space, the cost for that service goes down and you have more opportunities for people to live in nice, comfortable homes. It's, like if you get over like someone might make money off of this transaction, if you're not fundamentally mad that someone somewhere might profit, then you start looking at the actual problems and the way markets solve them, you can get to a point of like understanding how government has gotten in the way and made the situation so much worse here. And demonstrably so. Like some of the cities where they've done these reforms that we're talking about, rents went down. They didn't just like fall flat, they went down.
Yeah. Again, like I've mentioned it before, but like I'm at that age where all my kids are out of the house. Like I rent out a room, but if I am not renting out a room to a psychopath, like I'm not, because I can't count on the sheriff's department. I can't count on the laws of New York State to back me up.
Yeah.
Someone could be in my house for months. I'm not dealing with that. Like, and I like money and I like people. It's a wild kind of combination that would work out really well. And the other thing that doesn't get emphasized enough is how advantageous laws like this are to big property investors. Like, and look, BlackRock is a conglomerate and they do a lot of different style investing. They do create businesses that serve needs in communities. And one of the ones they do is they're buying up residential property because of laws like this. If this law chases a landlord out and causes them to sell their property at a declined price, BlackRock has lawyers on retainer. They'll come in, they'll buy that property, they'll destroy that law, and then you'll be stuck with twice the problem. Like how do people not see the obvious problems with that and that continuing cycle? It's so obvious to me. I don't know. Like, oh well.
Yeah, no, it is part of it. And again, maybe I don't know. Maybe we should do this on the actual show. I don't. Or do you want to talk about the break that law in Congress about limiting corporations from owning too many properties?
I didn't even read up on it, but we could talk about it on the show real quick because I think it's be good for our audience that we do on the internet, and it would be good for our radio audience. Like,
all right, we'll talk about that on the show. We'll go back in 5 seconds. Welcome back to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wilson today, joined by Tim the Freedom Varian O'Connor, and we're talking housing.
And we're talking about the government is going to save us from big residential investors. Like, hooray! Here we go again.
So they say they're trying to get hedge funds out of housing. They're trying to limit the number of houses, single family homes that that they can own, that any one business can own. And essentially they're blaming, like, because you'd mentioned both, I think in the main show and on break, talking about like BlackRock and things like that. And a lot of people are blaming companies like them for why rent is going up, right? Because they are buying some houses, right?
Yep.
And so what they're saying is that if any company owns more than 75 single family homes, that they'd have to pay an annual fee of $10,000 per home into a trust fund that would be used as down payment assistance for families. So again, you're going to
oh my God.
So what they'll do is basically these companies will then say, okay, we have to factor that into the price. We're going to raise rents, and then we're going to subsidize the demand of people buying homes while doing nothing to increase the supply.
They have actuaries that just sit there figuring out their best angle to take this particular law on already. And you just nailed it, right? They're just going to be like, oh, let's do some math. We've got to up all of our rents across the country by 7% this year. And it looks like another 7% next year. And as long as we achieve that 7% price increase, we'll have plenty of money to fund this. And as a bonus, we're going to be subsidizing people buying houses. So our existing properties are going to increase in value. It absolutely does nothing to level the playing field, and it enriches it. They've already
it's gonna end up with them making more money. Like that's what it, like, these corporations are gonna make more money. And like part of the reason why companies like BlackRock and these other big investment firms are going after single family homes is because in many cities, they've artificially limited the creation of new housing, constrained supply. People still want to live in those places. Rents go up. So suddenly it's very, very profitable to own homes in these places because the value of those homes keep appreciating. And then they can either rent them out at exorbitant prices or flip them with very little work and make money because of the policies that we've incentivized these companies to do this.
Yeah. Let me say
And
it
then
a
we're just
different
piling
way.
on. Again, another way of making it worse because we're trying to stop the big bad corporations. We're going to make it worse and more profitable for them at the same time. And then the government's going to go and do another thing after that. Like, I know it, Tim. I already know how this script goes in 10 years when we figured out that they made a bunch of money off of this.
They're going to demonize BlackRock and then do the same thing again. They're going to reinvent this wheel. And it's going to be this again. It's called a spiral. It's called a cycle. It's just so obvious. Like, here's how we should frame it: the government steals property from individuals on behalf of BlackRock. That's literally what's going on, regardless of whether it's ignorant or not, whether they do it under the guise of good intentions. That's what they're doing. They're stealing individual rights and giving them to BlackRock. There.
Yeah. That's kind of how it ends up happening. Again, it's, and I say all this stuff, like, again, I don't have any particular love for like these big corporations who are doing these things, but
yeah,
you just have to recognize like how the law ends up making things like better for them, how you end up with unintended consequences by passing these types of laws. And you end up further, like in this case, it doesn't actually push out like, the landlord, the like kind of small to mid-tier like property managers, but all the other stuff does. Again, it's everything in combination that you end up with higher rents and bigger corporations controlling like bigger chunks of land. And it is also fair to point out that like nationwide, these big corporations that own 75 or more single family homes are not, it's not really all that much of the housing stock. It's something like 5%, but in some cities, it's really high. In some, like there's a thing in the New York Times article I was reading about it where it said in Charlotte, North Carolina, like 17% of the city's homes were like kind of purchased in cash by some of these like big investment places, and in a few others, like it's there's some cities where it's high, like where they are buying it, but a lot of times like the cause of that is, in part, like you've created incentives for these types of transactions to be profitable for them in those particular places because you can't build because rents are high and the prices of homes keep going up.
Yeah.
And also like families are being driven out too. The families are incentivized to leave because as the home value goes up and your taxes go up, I just got my Rochester assessment in the mail. I'm not kidding. My assessment doubled in value.
Oh, no,
like,
no
legitimately
way.
doubled.
I'm sorry.
And so, yeah, my taxes are going up.
Yeah,
And
they
for
are.
me, that stinks. I can take the hit, but there are some people where that's going to be the last straw. That's going to be the difference between them having a home, being able to afford staying in the place that maybe they've lived in for decades, and having to leave and having to sell their home to someone. And like
actually a tragedy, right? Like when they do that, they're and again, guys, like I'm a libertarian, but I grew up poor, and I'm telling you, the government is constantly attacking people at the margins, right? Like they mean well. They got to raise taxes for programs, but they're going to lose home ownership based on doubling assessments like that. That's it. Like that's an absolute fact. It's awful, Kevin. It's a disaster. It's sad. It's all sorts of things all sorts of words that I want to emote, but the reality is that if we don't slow this down and if we don't wake more people up, where does this mess end?
Again, we're either going to double down on whatever goofy tactic the virtue signalers do, or we'll just try fascism or something like that.
I mean, you'll own nothing and be happy. I think that's where it ends, Kevin. I mean, that's what I'm afraid of.
Could be that. But
I did see where Biden is going into. He wants to help 400,000 families, give or take, buy the home of their dreams. What could possibly go wrong? Let's subsidize demand. Let's constrain supply. Let's distort the market, and let's make existing property owners First of all, it's devaluing the dollar. It's not. God, there's so much wrong with it. I don't even know where to
I
start.
know. But
So
like again, but like the story that tells, right? Like we're helping 400 families achieve their home for a first time, right? Like we're helping those families like build wealth and get property. It sounds great. It sounds like a good thing to help people. And like look at our generosity, where these are the types of programs where we spend money and make a genuine impact. Okay, that sounds really
sounds
nice, but
wonderful.
again, it's the seen and unseen thing. It's like, what have we now lost because we have broken these windows? Like, where are the other opportunities that we've missed by making it easier for the market to operate? How many other families do not get homes because we implemented this policy? Probably more, not this particular one, but a whole bunch of stuff, but probably more than 400,000
Yeah,
families.
yeah,
You know, it
absolutely. It seems like, and look, constraining supply is going to exacerbate homelessness, driving up the price of rent, exacerbating homelessness. And so then what's the solution they're left with is the government goes into providing housing directly. And look, that's a
which
challenge. It's
Which yeah, that has a mixed record,
yeah,
for sure.
sure does.
It's there's you know, it, projects aren't necessarily associated with like good, high quality, safe housing. Um,
Correct. And there's then they zone out the potential of businesses being near them. They do lots of other damages. Like it's hard to get a job near a project because there's no businesses that provide jobs near projects because of zoning, because the government came in and took over all the property. Like, and so
yeah,
then the inevitable consequence of that is that entrepreneurial minded people go into black markets. And here we go. We
yeah,
increase a cycle of violence. It's just like everything we come up with that the government touches, even though it's well intentioned, we see the disaster in it. And some people are listening to us. Some people are waking up to it. Argentina's apparently, got a grasp on it. Like, all right, maybe there is a little too much government. Let's get this guy in here and have him get rid of some of this stuff.
yeah. Excited to see how that goes. If there isn't, a violent revolution in Argentina.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and there may be violence. You're dealing with entrenched power structures that have been making out fine based on their understanding of how the economics works and how their shakedown and corruption of the government there works and how controlling the resources of that country works for them. So yeah, there may be violence, right? People don't give up power without a fight. So yeah, there may be violence, right?
Yeah,
It's a reality.
that's an unfortunate part of that. Um, so we have a few minutes left, and I don't want to dwell a ton on this topic. Trump being on the ballot in Colorado.
It's a travesty, Kevin. It's an absolute travesty. It's an authoritarian overstep. It's proof that the entire judicial system has been weaponized against middle class America.
So you don't have very strong feelings about this.
or something. No, I have strong feelings about it. I think it's a horrible idea. I'm sure that you're not going to persuade me, but you're going to present the case that on some level it's probably legal, and on some level it's appropriate. And
Yeah.
I don't know. Go ahead. I want to
So
get your
so I
rational take on it.
I'll go ahead and like lead up front where I don't agree with this and don't think it is a good idea to kick Donald Trump off the ballot in Colorado. Like I think it's a bad idea. It's a bad look. People are gonna cry foul and just kind of dig in more. And they're gonna claim in this case with some justification that the system is rigged against them. And in this case be kind of right. So again, they're kicking Trump off the ballot. The legal reasoning behind it. And I tweeted an article from I think Ilyas Somin was the person who wrote it, making the case for why this had sound legal grounding. And basically that by definition, Donald Trump did participate in an insurrection, and they lay out in the court case like how he specifically participated in an insurrection and kind of used existing violence on January 6th to try to keep himself in power illegitimately. And therefore, this law related to the Civil War that bars people who participated in insurrection from being like an officer of the United States, like a president, right? That applies in this situation, right? Because again, it was meant to bar, say, like, Robert E. Lee from running for office, but it's being used against Donald Trump. And the argument goes, again, he participated in an insurrection, and therefore, because he did this knowingly, not just everyone else who participated, but he knowingly did this, he should not be allowed to be on the office, that this law can be applied at the state level, and that he is, as an officer of the United States, broke his oath to the Constitution and therefore is ineligible in the same way that, Confederates were ineligible, right?
Right.
Again, I don't know that I fully buy into that. Again, I've said my feelings on the January 6th stuff, but I think
it was not an insurrection. Should people be punished for their horrible behavior that day? Yeah. On what level should they be punished? Exactly the same level that other people have been punished for their horrible behavior on other days. So that leaves a lot of people under the impression that I'm saying no punishment because BLM didn't get punished. A lot of people
and actually, so we have like a minute left. I just want to make this point real quick.
Go ahead.
Because like you brought up the BLM thing, right?
Yeah.
And that's where I think that this ruling goes, is that if this stands, if the Supreme Court affirms this ruling, is that suddenly there's going to be a bunch of folks looking for other ways in which people have participated in an insurrection.
Correct. Yeah. They're Bowman. Yeah. He's an insurrectionist. Got to go.
So they're going to keep. I think like Republicans are going to take this and they're going to say, okay, like anyone who participated in Black Lives Matter, basically, like you're an insurrectionist. You tried to overthrow the country. Anyone who says something seditious, they're going to say that was like, I think they're going to push for that. Like, again, that may get shut down. We have a lot of free speech protections in the country, but I think that's the next step of this if this goes further. On that note, though, we have to head the break. Thanks again for joining us here on the Free Solution on WYSL. We're going to be back in just a few minutes. Talk to you soon. Yeah, I'm making a whole slippery slope fallacy here.
Sure. No, I think it's funny. I'm not that upset about it. I don't really want Donald Trump to run for president again. I don't want to lie about that. I don't want to sidestep that. I know that he's going to. The chaos is going to be epic, and I love chaos. So like, it's all good with me, man.
So I like whenever people hear that, like I do like a political show or something, like, oh, what do you think of the 2024 race? I'm like, well, it's probably going to be Biden and Trump again. And they all go, like Democrats, Republicans, like everyone, they're just like, yeah, that's going to stink.
Oh, God.
And just like, I've like never heard anyone who's like, yeah, I'm excited for that race. Like, thank goodness our democracy is healthy and we have a great choice and we know what policy direction our leaders will take by making a selection. Nope, no one says that. We have no idea that we have two doddering old fools who are going to be running the country. Pick your flavor, like confused or angry. Those are the options.
It's just wild where we're at, that this system is giving us Trump versus Biden. That's if people can't see that the system in and of itself has an inherent flaw that we need to come up with a better solution for, which, guys, is simply being brave enough to vote for your favorite third party person. That's literally one of the easiest solutions, right? Just be brave enough to not buy the line that voting for the lesser of two evils is somehow morally better than voting. Like, you're still voting for evil. Like, hello, so the solution is really simple. The system is busted. And I don't understand how more people don't get that. Like, we're going to end up with Trump versus Biden. Wow.
Yep, we sure are. Wow. Doing this again.
I know we're going to do this again. And if we don't do it again, it's going to be because Well, because Joe Biden's health decides to take him out of it, or better yet, some of the scandals actually like amount to something, and they tell him that he can't run. So that's going to be epic. And
Then we
enough
get
legal challenges to keep
candidate
Trump off the
Kamala
ballot.
Harris.
What's that?
Then we get candidate Kamala Harris, and
The Democrats don't want that. They know better. They're still smart enough to know that that's not a good plan. They know.
it'd be great. Or it's that, or like Gavin Newsom jumps in.
Newsom.
Yeah,
They'd run Newsom. They would.
they would.
Or
Yeah,
honestly, Michelle Obama. If Michelle Obama runs, she wins, Kevin. It's like this is where we're at. It's populism times 1 million. If Michelle Obama wins, she'll.
I
or
don't.
If she
I
runs,
don't see it
she
this
wins.
year. Like I just don't like maybe, but I don't see Michelle Obama like suddenly jumping in this particular election. Like there'd have to be
You
more
might be
build up.
right, but if she was to run, she would win.
Yeah, like listen, it would end up being somewhat like Gavin Newsom or Gretchen Whitmer or God forbid, like Andrew Cuomo, like decides to jump in for some reason.
Wow.
No, I'm kidding about the Cuomo one. Like I would love to see, like again, like Jared Polis would be like the only Democrat I would even like think about, and I know he has a bunch of problems, but like he's more closer to my position than most other Democrats, so he gets partial credit for it.
I hate Jared Polis's presence on online media, but overall, like he does adhere to some sort of strict principles of mostly liberty, other than like stoplight cameras and stuff like that. But him and Ron DeSantis were the governors of popular states that were like, well, what? We're not saying lockdown. That's not how this is going to work.
Both of those states, they opened up quick.
Yeah.
And like listen, if we got a presidential debate between like Jared Polis and Ron DeSantis, and both of them competing for like who opened up quicker and like how their responses were like more limited government, I would love that. I would love the like rhetorical shift, because we have the opposite of that now with Joe Biden.
We do. That's so awesome. Yeah. No, we have two guys that were like, yeah, lockdown harder, like spend more money. Yeah, you know what we need to do? Close businesses and spend trillions and trillions of dollars. That's what we have to do. It's wild. It's wild.
But
I don't know.
Anyway, we should probably get back to the main show at some point.
Yeah, we better. We actually we left a really important subject for the last segment, Kevin. So
we did.
It's awkward. So we'll take it on.
All right, we'll go back in 5. Welcome back to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wiltz, your host today, joined by Tim, the Freedom Variant O'Connor.
I'm here, Kevin, and actually we saved and we don't normally do this, but we saved a really important subject for the last segment of our show. And as everyone knows that listens to this show, Kevin and I are actually beyond your Second Amendment absolutists, right? We're actually like, hey, the Second Amendment is just telling you that we already have that right. It's not granted to us by a piece of paper. We see the problems of gun control. We see these issues of like individuals have an inherent natural right to self-defense. That's without question. We have in New York State where if you take advantage of your right to self-defense, or you exercise your right to self-defense. I'm sorry, that's the best way to put it. Exercise your right to self-defense. You automatically still get arrested, Kevin. And we have cases upon cases of good people defending themselves. And now what?
Yeah. And still going to jail, right? So New York State, we'll share a link to this story, but there's a guy named LaShawn Craig, who's likely to spend many, many years in jail. And he was involved in a self-defense situation. He was involved in a situation where he was kind of outside of his house. He heard an alarm go off. He went in, saw someone like with a mask on, with gloves on, like going through stuff, and was reaching for his pocket, and thought that he was in danger, and he fired some shots at this guy. And he used his gun to protect himself, right? Like that's what it is. And law enforcement, apparently were saying like that it was a justified homicide, and like they didn't bring charges against him for that, for killing this guy. What they did bring charges against him for was not having his weapon properly licensed.
Yeah.
That's
It's incredible. Billy Binion, he's a Reason magazine writer who I've basically been unfamiliar with. I know you've retweeted him a few times, but he frames it exactly one of the ways that I think is important for people to understand, that the right to self-defense should not be dependent upon your economic status. And that's the reality of LaShawn Craig. Like, it costs money to register your guns. You have hoops to jump through, and you have, especially in densely populated urban areas, all sorts of other laws that are going to cost you money and interfere with your time. And that in and of itself is an injustice. You're circumventing our natural right to self-defense with your petty laws, and you're punishing poor people, and it drives me crazy. Poor people are just as important as rich people when it comes to the self-defense issue. True. There should be no difference in the eyes of the law.
Yeah. And so again, we have, and this happens, unfortunately, like all the time. And sometimes it's cases like this where it's someone residing in a state like New York where, there are strict gun licensing laws, and someone for one reason or another has a firearm. They use it in self-defense. Again, they don't get anything for that. They get the process crimes. They get you didn't ask the state's permission to defend yourself.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, we can't say that strong enough. Like, I love what you're saying. I want to scream it, right? Like, that's how I feel right now. So I'm sorry that I interrupted you, but you cannot say that strongly enough or emotionally enough to bring the point home.
Yeah, no, it's a huge, and like there are other cases too where like sometimes like someone is like traveling, like I wish I found this before we started talking about, but there's a woman who's traveling from like Texas up through like New Jersey or something like that. Mm-hmm. And she had a like legal firearm, and it was like with her, and like the place she was staying, like it was legal for her to have that firearm with her, right? It was in like Pennsylvania where she was supposed to be, I think, and then she'd like gone into Jersey for like a little bit, got pulled over, and then faced prison time because she just traveled through a state before her final destination. And again, legal in where she got it, legal for her to travel, through almost every state to get there. And then one person says, yeah, this person needs to be thrown in a cage for years away from her family, away from her children, because she didn't ask our state's permission to have an item for self-defense on her person.
Yeah, and that's horrible. She got physically attacked in that situation. That was a really bad story. I wish I did have more details of it. Kevin, I heard stories about people flying through with a stopover at LaGuardia. There was a huge article about it about 3 years ago, and I didn't keep track of it, where they have a registered firearm that was permissive in the place that they went to, and then at the place that they're returning to. And since they laid over in LaGuardia, they still get shaken down for multiple thousands of dollars because their registration for their weapon doesn't match New York State's requirements. It's insane. It's insane what they do. These people are so bad. They're so bad. Yeah. That one drives me crazy. I wish I had the article like saved somewhere, but I will check it out.
So actually, that the one I was thinking of was Shaneen Allen, and Chris Christie ended up pardoning her when that after she had already gone through a bunch of stuff. But
yeah, that guy should be president.
Hey, he would be a different type of entertaining, right?
Oh my God, yeah.
Like he is sort of fun to watch clips of in the debates, because he's just like the only one who actually has the guts to be like, no, Trump stinks.
Yeah. I don't think he's got enough like juice to become president, but
he won't. It's just that I sort of appreciate that he's the only one up there doing that, and he's, I think he's pointing out, I was like, dude, you are all running against him. Why won't you say anything negative about the guy? Come on, let's go.
Well, look, Trump is whether we like it or not, actually gaining in popularity with all of these little legal skirmishes that he's being forced to deal with. So it's a strange time in our society, Kevin. I think that people have had it with the mainstream media. People have had it with the narrative coming out of the White House about everything from GDP to inflation. That is, no one in the real world is experiencing the inflation that Joe Biden thinks that he's talking about. These people are disconnected from the everyday reality of going into the grocery store, spending $200 and getting like one refillable bag full of stuff. Like we are being squeezed through like irresponsible financial policy. The inflation is worse than they're saying, and it's actually devastating people.
Yeah.
So gas prices are down.
Thanks, Joe Biden.
Thanks, Joe Biden.
Give him full credit for that.
Yeah, well, he'll take full credit for it. He wouldn't take credit for it when gas prices were going up, which was very interesting. He had no, ability to impact gas prices, even when he went hat in hand to Venezuela and to Saudi Arabia and to OPEC. Even though he begged them to increase their production so that gas prices would go down, he has no effect on the price of
yeah,
gas.
No, not really a ton up or down.
Yeah.
So let's see. Actually, this is a good one. Patricia on YouTube says, "Have you seen the Home Alone Kevin McAllister post about groceries?" Have you seen that? Oh, I think, Patricia, if you have it in front of you, I think it's groceries had gone up 250%. Like the same groceries that he bought in Home Alone would cost 250% more in 2023. So it's a big jump from.
Oh yeah, I did catch it. Yes, I did actually. Yep, I did catch that. It didn't reach all the way into my brain.
Yeah,
sometimes that happens.
But just want to throw that. We've been kind of neglecting the comments here a little bit. Let's see.
Reading them and they make me laugh. I love them.
Yeah, no, we're seeing the comments, folks. Yeah, we'll read a couple of those while we have a few more minutes on WYSL. Facebook user, I'm pretty sure shall not be infringed, gives everyone a right to defend themselves. Shall not be infringed is pretty easy to understand. Yeah, I mean, it's the Second Amendment. You have a natural right to self-defense, and the Second Amendment limits the government's ability to remove that right from you. Mm-hmm. Right. And the only way you can have a right removed from you is under due process of law. Right. So that's the Fifth Amendment. You can't have your rights taken away. Like you can have your right to liberty taken away, but there has to be due process for that to happen. And there's not a ton of that with the right to self-defense.
Yeah. It's unequivocal. Like we can't, there's no conversation that we can have. We can look at the gun control in Israel and how that absolutely failed to allow Israelis to protect themselves from a terrorist attack. At what point does enough become enough? Like where can we just say, hey, virtue signaler, hey, ghoul, stop dancing on the graves of dead people. Like you can't keep us safe. And your laws will not keep us safe. My responsibility and my obligation is to keep myself safe. Like I get that. And let's stop punishing people for protecting themselves. Like, it's nuts. It's nuts.
Yeah. I get it. James on Facebook says gun registration is unconstitutional, period. All right. James, sorry.
Jamie Vanderwalker.
Yeah, Jamie. Sorry, I read that quick. I'm sorry, Jamie. But gun registration is unconstitutional, period.
Yeah, I agree. It's simple. It's unconstitutional. Where the cases that are getting presented to the Supreme Court are coming back very favorably in favor of gun ownership. All of that's great, but still, it's a scary time, and people are still being in New York, especially, are going to be incarcerated for exercising their right to self-defense, and it's an absolute travesty. And again, like you said, it's process crimes, and it's not having the right piece of paper or having a clip with too many, that holds too many bullets, and then like years in jail. Not a small fine, not something like process crime oriented punishment. It's legitimate incarceration. Obviously, guys, it drives me crazy. I'm sorry.
And it's again, like something where like many of these people too don't even have any like history of violence that would preclude them from owning a firearm, right? Like it's not like they're having their ability to not get a firearm is related to past behavior. It's just, they didn't quite follow the rules and being able to obtain access to their self-defense. They didn't follow the bureaucratic processes, which can be expensive and difficult. And then, they are now facing years in jail. Again, it doesn't seem right to me, and I know to either of us, and probably to anyone listening to this show, to have someone spend years in jail for that, and that to be in a situation where they had to defend their life, and they're not getting punished for the way they did that, but they are getting punished because they didn't legally have access to this thing. And there are other cases too. One of the other ones that Billy Binion had tweeted about was someone who had used their firearm in self-defense for a robbery, and he let the cops search this guy's home after that happened. He just let him in, and they found some like guns that weren't registered properly, and now he may face like the rest of his life in prison for that. For a justified self-defense situation. But now
it's a shame because people want to have this belief that and this is going to hurt me to say because I know police officers, but they are going to do the state's bidding regardless, right? So the police officers, the investigators saw an opportunity to ask this guy if they could search his home. He mistakenly granted them permission, and now I wish I could remember his name off the top of my head, but now this guy's going to be facing the rest of his life in jail or millions of dollars.
Charles Foner is this guy's name. And the woman I was trying to think of too, who came from Texas to New York, that was Jasmine Phillips.
Okay.
And again, owned it legally, but she spent a year. She was sent to Rikers for weeks. She lost custody of her children's for a year and was evicted from her home. Like again, for a gun that she owned legally in the state in which she lived. And it's just, I don't know, that like the punishment doesn't fit the crime there. It was no crime. Yeah.
There should have been no punishment, like, because that was going in my head too. So I was ready for that. Like, there is no crime. There should have been no punishment. And that's the reality of the state of New York, the authoritarian state that we live in.
Yeah. No. All right, but we are out of time for this show. We didn't even get to talk about like, the Chick-fil-A issue or several other things. But maybe we'll spend a few minutes after the show. WYSL audience, sometimes we talk for a minute after the radio show. Find our podcast, A Free Solution. Go look us up on Spotify, subscribe to our podcast. But we're out of time for our WYSL audience. Thank you so much for listening this evening. Have a great night, folks. Take care. Should I leave the sound of you pouring another beer in the podcast?
Yes, that would be perfect. Yeah, this is a good point too. Our prison systems are training grounds for sure.
Yeah, that's part of it. Patricia on YouTube says, kind of like George Young from movie Blow. You go into prison, nickel and dime dealer, come out of drug kingpin of the decade. I mean, it's part of it. Yeah, it's our prison systems have some issues for sure. And
here's the digits on the McAllister tweet right there, I imagine.
Yep. In Patricia on YouTube says 1990 his groceries were 1983, now 72.28.
That's wild.
Yeah, big jump.
That's a big jump.
But yeah, I'm gonna share that tweet, by the way, from that Reason writer with all
I'm gonna do a little bit more work checking on his stuff. That was good stuff. I think a lot of libertarians like me get like Reason makes us mad, like when they take on Oliver Anthony in Richmond, north of Richmond, like why do that? Like it doesn't make sense. Okay. But like, but they do write a lot of good stuff, guys. And they do offer most of their content for free. So, their articles are worth checking out. They hit a lot of the high points that we talk about.
Yeah.
And again, what Billy did here was talk about exactly the framing of gun control and how it disproportionately can affect people of poor economic situations. And to me, that's a real problem. And I don't know why more people don't I don't understand why Democrats don't understand that. Where people,
well, it's occasionally criminal justice Democrats will talk about it. Like I remember it was a thing when the most recent round of gun control laws got passed in New York State, where like the criminal justice reform advocates were like, this is going to mean like a lot more like poor people and people of color are going to end up in prison for like essentially like process crimes.
right. Why not? We have to keep those prisons filled somehow, Kevin.
Yeah, and so like they're like that's what they're gonna have in jail because like they just didn't update their registration based on the new laws or things like that.
Yeah.
And and they unfortunately this was like a bunch of like defense attorneys who are saying like they see that stuff all the time, unfortunately. So hey, Greg, just to pick a somewhat lighter topic, did you see the new law about New York State Thruway requiring businesses to be open 7 days a week now?
Well, sure. I mean, it's a day late and a dollar short, and you won't be able to get Chick-fil-A if New York State passes that law. But
well, you'll still be able to get it. Like their contract is still staying in place. It's just the new ones. Any new contracts that get issued, they are required to operate 7 days a week.
So it's going to be a moral hazard or a moral question for Chick-fil-A. Are they going to accept the new contract, which I presume they're going to be finding lucrative, and be open on a Sunday? Will New York State force its will on Chick-fil-A, or will Chick-fil-A say, "Sorry"?
Well, see, the way you framed it is interesting because I've seen that framed in other places. I actually saw like Project Liberal frame it that way. They shared like an Alabama news article that said like New York State is forcing Chick-fil-A to open 7 days a week. It's not exactly what's happening here.
Right.
Because like Chick-fil-A is operating outside the Thruway system, can close on Sundays. Not an issue. New York State's not changing anything about that. Right. It's specifically, and in fact, the Chick-fil-A's already existing or contracted to exist within the New York State Thruway stops. They can still close on Sundays. Yeah. Now, people with like a smidgen of common sense, like you and I, would have said, "Hey, maybe it's not a good idea to allow a restaurant in there as the single like warm food provider who isn't open on one of the busiest travel days of the week." And so that is 99.9999% of New York State. And I don't know why the people who decided on these contracts were like, "Oh, but Chick-fil-A is really good," or whatever. Like, I don't.
Well, they bid. It's a forbid thing, right? So yeah. They are on some level obligated to take the highest bidder, and I guess that means Chick-fil-A said, "You know where we want to be really, really badly is on the New York State Thruway." So they paid more money than McDonald's. They paid more money than Roy Rogers. They paid more money than Burger King, or offered more money than them to win this contract. So
that should have been a condition, though. Like, it's wild that it's not, like, because again, like I am not taking a strong position for or against Chick-fil-A itself, but I am kind of mad when I want to stop somewhere and it's Sunday and I'm like heading back from, like wherever I'm traveling from, and there's no like hot food options.
Yeah.
And then I have to wait 20 damn minutes to go to the bathroom too, because they ain't building up bathrooms.
I know they actually made all of the rest stops slightly smaller, but they're brand new, so enjoy.
So stupid. Oh man, like the one that like we usually stop at the most, like it's so dumb. I get so angry. They took out a bunch of seats so they could you could move around easier because people kept getting bunched up in the lines, which was preventing people from getting to the bathrooms.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there and I've been in line for like 15 minutes already, and this burger place is going slow. And I couldn't go to the bathroom because there's a line out the door, and then a whole football team comes in the door too. I'm oh my God. Like, I'm never going to go to the bathroom here. Like, this is going to be an hour before they all get through.
Yeah. Well, us rednecks have solutions for that. I can teach you the way, Kevin. There's workarounds here,
I know there are workarounds, but I also don't want to go to jail. But
I don't know.
But
I
like
mean,
all they needed is they could have taken that room and they could have been like one toilet in the corner and then a trough lining the rest of that room. That's all they needed to do.
like at a Bills game.
That's right, at a Bills game.
Like at a Bills game. It's just
The Bills games, like the bathrooms are pretty efficient. They move quick.
They do.
Like sometimes there's lines, but they go. And that's because everyone's just standing at a trough in a massive room.
Yeah.
And
oh, you're not comfortable standing next to somebody? I am. I'll see you later. You know what I mean? Like, I'm getting this done.
Exactly. They're like, nope. I've been sitting here. I've been drinking all morning, and I've had my $15 beer at the stadium. Like, yeah, I'm gonna go to the bathroom. I don't care at this point.
So look, Chick-fil-A does in fact, Kevin, make the best chicken sandwich in the world. Like, I don't know why people fight over Popeye's chicken. Like, I don't get it, because they could just go to Chick-fil-A, unless they're fighting over Popeye's chicken on a Sunday. Then, like, all right, I get it. But Chick-fil-A has amazing food. So, be that as it may, I just won't travel on Sunday. Wait, no, that's not how that's going to work. I'll just bring food with me.
Yeah. That's yeah, I mean, it's basically, it's like, okay, well, I guess you can get like the cold prepared foods at the places where they have it. They still have that. But I don't know, like, honestly, sometimes I just want a burger or something.
Yeah. I mean, it is kind of weird that New York State contracted with Chick-fil-A, like you're saying. Like,
yeah,
they
like
didn't have the foresight to realize that contracting with Chick-fil-A was going to create a problem for people that travel on Sunday. And Sunday's got to be a big travel day, right?
Yeah, it's ton of ton of travel on those days. And like they're the New York State like Thruway Authority's justification is like, oh well, they have less than 50% of like the hot food options. Like, less than that's still a lot.
It's still a pretty big number, you weirdos.
Yeah. Again, LA it's weird like through and through, because again, it's mostly the 7 days a week thing, but also like New York State like loves to virtue signal about like like companies that they feel discriminate against folks, and like Chick-fil-A is like, they fairly or not, like that's one of the things that they're known for, is they like, people think that Chick-fil-A is like homophobic, right?
Well, they
and
discriminate against Sundays, that's for sure. So
they do so like the accusation is that like they donate to homophobic organizations in Africa that are like violent. Like, that's what they're accused of, and why like a lot of activists are like, you can't eat at Chick-fil-A.
right.
So that's what I say. And it's, again, I'm not like really taking it. I don't fully understand like what they're donating to and what they're accomplishing in that, because I've kind of gotten some mixed answers on it. But it's weird that New York State wouldn't be like, nah, like we're just gonna avoid this like politically correct woke fight by not including Chick-fil-A at all. Like,
well, it's right. It would have been on brand for New York State, was to just be like, well, Chick-fil-A
they wouldn't say it as
contract, but we don't want them doing business in New York on the New York State throughways. You know what I mean? Like, but probably it was like this, but their chicken is really good. Like, that's how I see how that argument went,
So,
is
so I've been told. I mean, I like there's a couple like really good like chicken sandwich places around here that I usually just go to those.
Yeah.
But
no, that could be, but Chick-fil-A, like a Chick-fil-A in Massachusetts is a Chick-fil-A in Connecticut is a Chick-fil-A on the New York State.
That's true. You get the consistency.
Yeah.
Which is kind of nice. Again, that's why McDonald's is a thing, right? Like, I know people like to bash McDonald's, but like, I show up to McDonald's in the middle of nowhere, Massachusetts, and it still tastes like McDonald's.
It is exactly a cheeseburger, right? That is the secret to their success. It's not that it's nutritious. It's not that it's, in my opinion, and I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, it's not that it's delicious. It's that it's consistent, right?
It's not like it's like their burgers are like, they're okay. And I know they're going to be okay. It's just that, okay, I'm driving through like middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania. Like I did this a few weeks ago. I visited one of my friends down in like the DC area. I'm like, okay, middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania. I can choose between like, this diner, which is going to take a little while, and I don't know the quality of the food, I'm trying to get to a place by a time, or I can go to McDonald's. I know exactly what it's going to taste like. It's kind of tough to go to McDonald's. If I had time, usually I'd stop at the diner. I'll stop at the local place. But, in this case, I was like, I need to be there. I don't want to wait 45 minutes. I just need to grab something and go.
I have I'm with you. I haven't been to McDonald's in a couple of years, but Chick-fil-A, on the other hand, the concept is the same. It's consistent. It's consistently good. It's consistently what you're expecting. It's great. In that sense, I for some reason McDonald's, I really soured on McDonald's about 4 years ago, and I don't regret it.
Fair enough, man.
Yeah, I do have a wild poll going, and I want your take on it. Right.
All right.
So there's a lot of talk. Excess mortality is making the news. Insurance actuaries are reporting that we're seeing a spike in we actually saw a decline in the age of life expectancy in the United States. People are dying faster recently than they have since I think 1943. Arguably, that would be around the time of World War II and our full involvement in there. But anyways, excess mortality is up. I ask why. Vaccines, inflation, authoritarianism, and my standard, how dare you? I just, it's basically how you want to see the results. No, it actually surprises me that the answer is turning out the way that it is. We have inflation at 5%. And now that's the one that I picked. I think that inflation has been a life-altering disaster to young people. I think that the response to COVID and the money that we spent and the devaluation of the currency and the destruction of life past, I think that is causing deaths of despair, deaths of high-risk behavior, deaths associated with drug use. So I feel as though like authoritarianism and inflation were where I was leaning. I think that even if the vaccine was bad, that it wouldn't have. And I don't think that the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is bad, and the mRNA vaccines are problematic for young men. And I wouldn't recommend that any young man takes it, but the mRNA ones. And actually, I would recommend against young people taking the COVID vaccine because they're way beyond health concerns for that.
Thanks, Dr. Tim.
That's my opinion. We're free to, but I really thought inflation would get a bigger response. That people would be more aware that the devastation from inflation that sure was kind of caused by COVID. I think we're mixing something up there. That's it's weird for me to have that take because I love my polls and usually everybody's right. But this time I'm like, well, I think you guys are missing the point. I think that it's an inflationary environment and a life destruction environment, the authoritarian response to COVID. So I wanted those two to win. What do you think about that?
I think that among many people that are your followers and broadly the libertarian and conservative movements, that their primary motivator is vaccine issues. Like for a lot of people, that is like a big motivator for them. So anytime they can bring up that, they're gonna do it.
Okay.
Often, and I say that is more important for many of them than spending and inflation issues, even though they might bring that up occasionally, because they support not all libertarians, but because many of those folks who run those circles support people like Trump, who did not give a single shit about like responsible spending and is, in fact, I think a key factor in addition to Biden and Obama in driving up inflation over the last several years, and Bush. So like the conservative movement specifically has gone so far off from like limited government, fiscal responsibility, like positioning that like
it's kind of funny, right? If a conservative like I'm a conservative for Trump, you're kind of like, have you lost your freaking mind? Like, no offense, but like Trump did some things that were, well, I don't know. I can't really off the top of my head think of anything that he did that was conservative, other than allowed the government to close down for like one day and then promise more fiscal conservatism in the future, but never deliver on it. Like
he's still promising it. He's like, if you elect me, I'm gonna take care of the national debt. What?
yeah.
Why?
Okay. Are you? Because you didn't. You know what I mean? You kind of had a chance there, bud. You know?
Yeah. No, you had your opportunity. You blew it. Why would we assume you're going to do the right thing this time?
I mean, I get the argument that he had a lot of bad people around him, but he had a lot of bad people around him. Like
he chose to have those people around him.
They're still there. They're going to be bad people around him next time too. You know?
Yep, exactly.
I don't know, Kevin. Did we solve any of the world's problems? I think hopefully we persuaded Norwich to take a hard look at that law that they're writing.
Nuisance law, the rent control stuff.
Yeah, I hope we got a few more people. Unfortunately, like we're kind of preaching to the choir when it comes to self-defense issues here. But hopefully we can get our friends to evangelize things. You know, like
share the podcast.
Yeah, share the podcast. Talk about these Second Amendment issues. I think you guys enjoy Kevin and I enjoy doing the show. I think you enjoy our takes on things. I think we're a good balance. Like I want to fly out the handle. Kevin doesn't want to fly out the handle, but then Kevin will fly out the handle, and I want to be balanced. So it kind of works out. Like we're a nice balance. So, and don't forget, guys, like one of the things that I've really enjoyed doing was talking to Thomas Queter and finding, it was hard, right? Because Christmas is coming and it's like that time of year. And it's like, I found some money to help out one of his pet projects, and it felt good to do that, right? Like, and actually I was kind of like, I found one where they were kind of doing a 50-50 raffle where they wanted to raise $50,000 and they were going to award $25,000 to somebody. So I got involved in that one, and it was hard to come up with that money, but it was worth it, and so that's something around Christmas. You got a few bucks, right? Actually, whenever you have a few bucks, think about supporting someone Queter's work. He does a great job. I was like practicing to have an actual sponsor of the show because I know they're coming.
Yeah, that's right. But it was a great conversation, and for folks who listen to the show, I fixed the editing in the third segment for that show too. So
good. Yeah. That was rough. I was
listening
to it, I was loving the show, and I'm like, what the heck's going on here? Wait, like there were these long pauses where then you and I were talking at the same time, and I'm like, something's up.
Yeah, it's off by a little bit, so I fixed that.
All right, cool.
But anyway, I think we're gonna call it a night. Yeah, this thing. Thanks everyone for listening. Thanks for all of the comments, participation to show. You guys rock. Merry Christmas, folks. Facebook user, Merry Christmas, guy. Kind of jealous of Kevin having a 2-year-old on that morning. Yeah, guys, it's gonna be so much fun. I'm so excited for Christmas because my boy's gonna get it now.
Oh my God, Kevin, we're at the opposite ends of this. Like every day we're doing something that is reflecting upon my youngest child is about to move on to adulthood. We're doing like senior nights at the school and like, oh God, it's like, I miss those days when they were tiny and little and everything was magic, man. So enjoy it.
Yeah.
They don't last. It doesn't last forever, man.
Yeah. No, I know it doesn't last. I'm gonna enjoy every second of it. Like it's gonna be fun. It's gonna be the first year where he's gonna feel like it's really like magical. He's gonna be like excited and jumping around.
He's once he figures out there's stuff inside those wrapped up things, it's like he's gonna go wild, man. It's awesome.
All right, so Merry Christmas. Yeah, it's gonna be Merry Christmas, folks. We'll see you next week.
All right.